Here it is, folks. This is what I'm expecting of you. This is the moment we've all been leading up to. Progress and redemption in about 5 to 8 minutes. So, God creates everything. And he places Adam and Eve in a garden. And he gives them a choice to love him or to do things their own way. They choose to do things their own way. They rebel and sin enters the world. And we quickly see that sin spreads from the individual to the family and to the entire world. So much so that God says, I got to fix this problem. He floods the earth. People disperse. The problem of sin, it's still there. They construct the Tower of Babel. God says it's not good that everybody be so alone. And he spreads them out by dividing their languages. A few generations pass, and God reaches out to an individual called Abraham. That's him right there with the A. And he makes a promise to Abraham. The promise has two sides to it. He says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and you're going to be a blessing to all nations. But this is kind of inconceivable because Abraham and his wife, they're barren. They can't have children. And there's 3 things you need to have a nation. You need to have people, you need to have a land, and you need to have a leader. They didn't have any of them. Abraham's story is pretty simple. He left the land on faith, he had a baby, and he died. Abraham's kid was called Isaac. Isaac found a wife, had a baby, 2 of them, in fact, and died. Isaac's kids were named Jacob and Esau. In our story, in God building a nation, we focus on Jacob. Okay? Now, Jacob is where things really start to pop off because Jacob marries 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah, and between the 2 of them, they have 12 children. And those children become the 12 tribes of Israel. One of those children is sold into slavery. Here's poor guy sold into slavery. His name's Joseph, right? He is sold into slavery, but God actually uses this for his purposes. Joseph rises up to be a great leader in Egypt, calls his family, and while the rest of the region is in famine, Egypt is prospering. And during this time, we move from having just 12 people to having a multitude of people. And so we finally have the first thing that we need in God's plan of constructing a nation. We have a multitude of people. Gets to be so many people, the Pharaoh of Egypt freaks out. Says we need to control this situation by putting these people into slavery. And he does so. And the people are in slavery for 400 years, crying out to God. And then God finally raises up a leader named Moses to lead them out of Egypt. Moses goes to Pharaoh, says, thus says the God of Israel, let my people go. Pharaoh says, no way. He's visited by 10 plagues, even the death of the firstborn. Finally, Pharaoh's like, okay, I've had enough. Y'all leave. And Moses leads the people out through the Red Sea. They cross on dry land, and they go into the desert. From that point, it's a 2-week journey to the promised land that God's prepared for them. On the way, they make a pit stop at a mountain called Sinai, and there, God gives them the 10 commandments. He gives them the law, and then says, go on into the promised land. They send spies into the promised land. Most of the spies say, we're scared, we can't do it. 2 of the spies says, oh, we can do this, we should trust God. The people choose not to trust God. So as a result, God says, you're not going to enter the promised land. You're going to spend all the time of your life wandering around in the desert until this generation dies off. And they did that for 40 years, wandering around in the desert. Even Moses didn't get to go into the promised land. He got to see it, but he didn't get to go in. So finally Moses dies, Joshua takes over, and it's time to invade. And their insertion point, here we have the Sea of Galilee, the River Jordan, Dead Sea, right? So they invade, and they conquer a city called Jericho, and they settle the land. But things don't go very well during this period, okay? It's a time of gross idolatry and immorality. And in fact, the scriptures say that during this period, everybody does what's right in their own eyes. This is the time of the judges, Samson, Gideon, Ehud, right? So Israel's functioning kind of like a loose confederacy, but God raises up his prophet Samuel, who kind of serves to unify Israel spiritually. And Israel's at that point is feeling all big and grown up, so they tell Samuel, we want a king like all the other nations. Well, first, he ordained Saul, and Saul's an absolute dud because he's prideful and unwilling to admit his sin. But along comes a righteous king named David. And actually, David receives another prophecy from God that the Messiah that he promised way back here in Genesis 3:15 is going to come through the line of David. David passes away. He has a son. He has a son named Solomon. And Solomon is a great wise king. And then Solomon has a son named Rehoboam. Rehoboam's a moron. Rehoboam overtaxes and overworks the people to the point where there's civil war. And Israel actually splits into two kingdoms. You have the northern kingdom of Israel, sorry about my spelling, and the southern kingdom of Judah. During this period of time, you have mostly wicked kings. Judah has some good ones, so they last just a little bit longer. But eventually God says, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and they're taken away into exile. First Assyria, then Babylon conquers Assyria, then Persia conquers Babylon. Now it's interesting, during the time of the Persians, Cyrus actually let some of the Jewish people go back. And two major things happen. First, they rebuild the temple, and then second, they rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Now, we enter what's called the intertestamental period, Greece and Rome, and this is the period where we find 1st and 2nd Maccabees in the Bible. And for 400 years, no prophet speaks in Israel. Around the time of the Roman Empire, we have the advent of Jesus Christ. And he's here for 33 years. He's crucified, died, raises again, and ascends back into heaven. His life is documented by the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then there's the story of the early church, which is Acts. Acts documents how the church undergoes intense persecution, but more importantly, it documents how the church spreads out into all the world. And it's continued to spread, and here we are today. And that is the story of the Bible.
Okay.